Welcome to episode 110 of the Necronama.com.
Hello, my name is Jared, and I'm interrupting, or delaying, depending on where James puts this episode of the Necronama.com to tell you all about the Summer of Zelda, a charity fundraising event I'm hosting, which starts on Saturday, May 1st at 11 a.m. Eastern Time over at twitch.tv/Solietu. This event will feature complete playthroughs of at least 2 3D Zelda games, Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, as I attempt to raise $500 for the Alzheimer's Association in support of their mission to eliminate Alzheimer's disease through the advancement of research to provide and enhance care and support for all affected, and to reduce the risk of dementia through the promotion of brain health. There are goals along the way that you can read all about at bit.ly/SOZinfo, which will add more games to the schedule and several more days or weeks to the duration of the event. You can support the event by hanging out on Twitch or by visiting bit.ly/SOZdonate. That will take you directly to my Tiltify campaign, where you can see the upcoming stream schedule and access Tiltify's secure donation portal. Thank you so much for listening. You can find all of the links I mentioned in the show notes for this episode and as the pinned tweet at Solietu on Twitter. And I now return you to your regularly scheduled social commentary.
I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And sometimes I think I write some really implausible shit. And then I watch a movie like Gothika and I realize it'll be okay.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And I don't know why you're hating on a Halle Berry movie already, man, but let's do this.
So joining us today, Jason McCord is here. Jason, welcome to the show, man.
Welcome.
Appreciate it.
So you've listened to a lot of episodes. You kind of know how all this goes, and we talk a lot because we're collaborating on some stuff that should be coming out in the next year or so. And I want to tell you, you're one of the people that I go to a lot with my daily problems. So I feel bad that you came here today and you're going to put up with me for 2 more hours.
This is why we talk about Gothika, because we have to make it a little more challenging for you.
I couldn't resist. No, why don't you tell our listeners a bit about yourself, man?
Well, I'm a Scorpio. No, I'm kidding. No, it's it's mostly just biggest thing is just big horror. I'm a big horror fan. I ever have been. Actually, my earliest memory, if I can get all, it's like the NPR interview that you do,
Oh yeah.
Let's do that. But no, my earliest memory, I was at my dad's house. I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, somewhere around there. And my dad had 2 movies at his house. We had Beauty and the Beast, and we had Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And that was it. That's what we had. So that's what I watched. And it definitely did some things to me. And fortunately, it gave me a love of horror. So it's one of those things where everything I do is basically an attempt to get as much horror content into my body as much as I can, which sounds vaguely sexual, but I promise it's not. So books, movies, anything about that. So I've just been exploring that for about 30 years now, and it seems to be working out pretty well.
Cool. And you've done some publishing work. You made the cassowary look all pretty when I released it, and I appreciate that.
Not a problem. Yeah, I've discovered that's been my true calling, I guess, is format editing. I just really like doing that, which is kind of nice because nobody likes doing that, ever.
Nobody. I've never met anyone other than you that enjoys it.
Me neither. I've yet to find. I'm sure there's somebody out there, but I haven't met them yet. So if you find them, let me know, because I'm going to kill him because I don't like competition.
Will do. If anyone out there knows somebody who does format editing and you want them dead, call Jason.
I'm on this.
So, why did you pick this film today? Why not Nightmare while we're at it? But yeah, why this film?
Well, it's one of the things where, I know the big thing you guys always talk about, which I do agree with, is that every piece of horror ever is social commentary. All of it. It can't not be. But some are more obvious than others.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nightmare series, while I love it, it's fantastic. It's pretty much on its sleeve. You get exactly what you're looking for. And, the Friday the 13th movies, you get exactly what you're looking for. And it's right there. It's on the surface. But then you have movies like Gothica, which is, I'm not going to say it's an underrated gem by any means, but it's certainly one worth exploring and worth talking about. And I don't think a movie like that would ever get its due. If someone doesn't take the chance to be like, hey, look, there's some things in this that's definitely worth looking at if you want to look past the obvious spooky ghost, elements. Spoiler: there's spooky ghosts in the movie. It is 18 years old, so I do apologize to everybody who hasn't gotten around to it yet.
But yeah, I actually thought I had seen Gothica, and I had not, and I have no idea what I thought I saw because it was not this. And I enjoyed it. I kind of made fun of it being completely implausible earlier, but like my real question is solely like, why, if this girl was gonna go into someone's body and then go kill her killer, couldn't she have done this with anyone else? Why did she have to wait till Halle Berry was there? That's my big problem. But was The
Shining, dude. They connected through The Shining.
Nice, yeah, that could be. Now, what you're saying with the social commentary, though, like. I really feel like this is a film that people might not realize has a lot of like rape triggers and, different stuff like that, molestation in general. So I just want to throw that out there we're going to have to talk about that a bit, but let's kick it to you, man. Where do you want to start?
Well, and actually you touched on it. And I think one of the big things this movie has going for it is that even while it may not necessarily seem like it, and it obviously, it has its flaws like every movie does. But one of the premier aspects of this is very much a feminist horror movie, if that makes sense to everybody who's listening to this. That's the core element of this. And one of the things about this movie that I enjoy the most, and it's one of the parts of horror that when you get to see this, I really enjoy, is we always see these movies. There's always horror things, and the movie's over, roll credits, but we don't really ever see or talk about what happens after it. And the real horror of this actual movie itself is that a horrific act took place, but then you have no recollection of it. You just have to take everyone at their word. Like, yeah, this happened. Like, oh, okay, if you say so. But the whole movie is basically just deconstructing and going after, talking about what happened after it, and taking aside the standard investigation aspect of every horror story, which I do enjoy. But the core of this is talking about the after effects. It's talking about the what now, and right. I really enjoy that. That's not something you see enough of.
Yeah, I mean, even like going in, I thought there was going to be more like her trying to prove her innocence or stuff like that. And I loved that it's just shut down. The evidence is overwhelming. Like, this is done. I thought it was cool that it just pulled that out because that's the crux of most films, like you said, so that was interesting to me.
No, it's really good. And it ties into, and again, when I talk about the feminist aspect of this, the very first note I took when I was watching this, about 20 minutes into it, the best word I could describe, like an alternative title of this, would be gaslighting. This entire movie could be essentially a very dramatic and overwrought examination of what gaslighting is at its source. Because almost every character in this movie that you're supposed to empathize with, that you see from their perspective, is gaslit like crazy. Just, I mean, like to the point it almost becomes parody. And I don't know if that was on purpose necessarily, but it did a really good job of showing this person who, by their own admission, all these professionals, everyone in her life that she's dealt with, as saying, basically, I couldn't have seen this coming. This is so out of character. This is really odd. By their own admission, this isn't her.
Right.
And yet, as she tries to make that same point to them, as soon as she starts doing like, oh, well, you're crazy, take your pills, and that's nice. Yeah, you're talking delusional. It literally, you could write a textbook on what gaslighting is just by reading the dialogue in this movie. And it does a really good job of explaining why people just don't say anything to anybody. Because why the hell would you?
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was something that I initially wrote, and I looked for it again, because I saw this movie when it came out back in 2003, and it didn't hit certain things for me, because I was kind of like what Jason was saying. I was kind of sitting there thinking like, okay, it's going to be a mystery. She's been set up, and it's going to be like The Fugitive. She just has to figure out a way to get out. But upon watching it second, third time, and of course now, that line, as far as you can't trust someone who thinks you're crazy, is a very powerful line, not just for Penelope Cruz's character, Chloe, but also for Miranda, when she starts to understand that no matter what I do, they can't trust me. They don't believe me because of who I am and who I was. So there is this moment where you're watching her and you're equally frustrated, or I guess closely as frustrated as she would be in this situation, trying to explain what happened or trying to figure out what happened and appear sane or just be sane. But the fear is those people are going to now look at you as you're just putting on airs, you're pretending, you're trying to act sane to get out of here. But you're also this award-winning psychiatrist, so you know the game. So you're going to try to game me to get out of here, to pretend to be sane. And I can't necessarily talk to anybody about this because they're going to have some ulterior motive. Where Robert Downey Jr.'s character, he's might not going to listen to you because he's going to be diagnosing you. The nurses are going to be listening to you because you hit one the other day, and now it's she may be pissed off with you, or you have the orderlies that are going to treat you a certain way. But it's just this whole system that's set up to where the people who are deemed insane, and I'm sorry, not the people who are deemed insane, people who are possibly sane are deemed insane and are sitting amongst people who have medical needs, who have psychiatric needs. And because of the system that's built, you can't get out of that once you've been labeled. And I guess that's, at least within the real world, that's also the label that you could have as far as a stigma that gets placed upon you when it comes to things like mental illness, as opposed to looking at it as something that we're going to treat. We look at you as a problem.
No, that's good. And it's nice though, because like that element, that same element of the mental illness and the stigma associated with that, particularly among women, because there's already that just the word hysteria in of itself is, just implies that women are just Looney Tunes just because they're women, and we haven't gotten over that. I mean, the medical science behind that's been disproven for however long, but we still haven't gotten rid of that notion. So you take that in of itself, and you have this systemic, like you were saying, the systemic issue of the system is set up in such a way that it's bad enough as it is. But then you take a woman specifically, or one of station, and trying to move through this, move past this, whatever, she's just gonna get shut down. There's no way you can win. Either you give in to them and they think you're just placating, or you fight against them and you're being delusional. It's a zero-sum game. Like there's nothing you can do at all. It's profound, and again, it's not something you that gets talked about enough, at least in this context.
No, and even in the movie The Changeling, there's a scene with Angelina Jolie's character and Amy Ryan, where they're in the sanitarium, or they're in the women's facility, and the same type of conversation takes place where Angelina Jolie's character is locked up because she's asking about her missing son. So the police put her away because she's problematic. We'll go ahead and say that she's crazy, so she can't go to the press and, rat out the LAPD for not doing anything. And when she's there, she runs to these other women, and they're women that were beaten by their husbands or prostitutes. There were all these women that where the psychiatric hospitals and psychiatric prisons were being used as housing facilities or dumping facilities for women. And historically, yeah, that was what you had in the latter part of the latter part of the 19th century, going in through the first half of the 20th century, especially when you had things like the suffrage movement, where women were, something's definitely wrong with you if you're trying to push for political action, or you're trying to step out of what we believe a woman is supposed to act like. And there's this scene where they're just talking about eating, and Amy Ryan's character tells her, like, eating is normal, and it's the only thing that you can control in there. So if you don't eat, you're depressed. If you eat too fast, you might be you might be neurotic. So she goes through this whole process to tell her, eat your food, but be careful because everybody's watching you in here. So eat your food as sane as possible, to paraphrase what she says, because they're going to look at you and deem that you have some type of psychological disorder, whether you have one or not. And it was all tied to, as you said, Jason, it's all tied to their femininity and being women. They were stepping out of what was the norm, and we can go ahead and claim that you are problematic. Where, Chloe's talking about being sexually assaulted, and they deem it as, oh, well, she's making up these stories, she's exaggerating. Even Miranda does the same thing. She's exaggerating. It's not, that's not really what was happening. She's having delusions. Where by the end of the film, you realize, like, no, she was getting raped, and she didn't know how to express it. Really, there was no one who was listening to her.
Well, I know this movie came out in 2003, and I actually think it would have had probably a more profound impact if it came out even 10 years later. Because while this movie is framed around the elements of mental health and believability and all that stuff, it's obviously not too hard of a stretch to compare this with, let's say, the Me Too movement and what that has been trying to get across for God knows how long. People are finally starting to get it. At least I think so. I hope so. And like you said, that element of you have a woman right there, that's already a strike against you in most cases, and you have these women who are, let's say, marginalized. I think it's the best way to describe this whole group. So you have this woman who is literally being attacked and raped, but even if she wasn't, it still comes down to that same problem of not being heard. You can speak till you're blue in the face, but no one has a word to say to you. And like James was talking about at the beginning here, there's her actual sexual assault in and of itself is obviously very much a representation of that, but all the rest of it too, it's the same basic problem. If you have a woman who's saying, I've been attacked or something bad is happening to me, there is always an explanation. There's always a dismissal of any kind of, like, oh, you could have fought him off. And in this case, you have our protagonist here, like, you are an all powerful psychiatrist. Like, how could you succumb to this? I don't believe it. I don't buy it. How could you? That's just not possible. They literally can't even, and it gives you nowhere to go. And for me, that's, talk about the horror of this movie. To me, the reason why I like this movie so much is because, to me, that is the real horror of this. The rest of it's just there to, to physically attach it to the world. But realistically, that's the horror. Imagine knowing deep down in your soul, you know exactly what's happening. Concrete, water's wet, sky's blue. This is what is happening. And every single person around you, people you respect, people you know, people you care about, are telling you, no, that's not it. You're wrong. And that's profoundly horrific, especially because as human beings, we have that psychological trait that if we hear a non-truth, something we know to be not true, if we hear it enough, the bias will actually twist our opinion. That's horrifying. That's frightening as hell.
Oh yeah.
To know, but then you start to second guess yourself, and you start to, that doubt of where you belong in the world or what makes sense to you in your world. I mean, that's spooky stuff. I mean, that to me is more frightening than any monster or any ghost or any, and you can just do that. Like, I know how to do that to people. I've been trained to do that. And I didn't mention this in the beginning, and it probably would have been helpful, but I mean, I spent 10 years running behavioral health programs. That was my job. My job was to help teach people with severe mental illness to reintegrate into society, to cope, and to manage themselves and the people around them as best they could so that they could lead the most productive life they possibly could. So, of course, in order to learn how to help everybody do that, you also have to learn how it hurts them. It's part of it.
Right.
You have to know both sides. And I taught people how to find these things because it was important for us. We had to know. We had to be able to find the parts in you the way like a 13-year-old can instantly look at you and just know precisely what's going to get under your skin. I had to reteach that skill to people because you had to be cognizant of those things so you could A, avoid them, or B, help train those in a certain way. It's not hard. It's really not. It's very easy to do, and it's really easy to break somebody psychologically. And even though these people weren't trying to do that at all, they still were. And it's amazing how these really well-intentioned people who really were just trying to do their jobs were harming her simply because she was trying to tell the truth and they wouldn't listen. It's profound, and it's universal, and thankfully now, again, with the benefit of almost 20 years now of experience and 20 years of perspective, you can hear that and be like, if you could have solved all of this with just the simple "I believe her,"
right,
which is our current mantra with anybody in terms of whether it's personal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, whatever it is, the best tool at your disposal is "I believe her." Period. And if they had just said that, any of them, the whole thing could have been avoided. And to me, that's horror. That's frightening, because it's very real, and that's what should scare you, not ghosts.
I think it's so good that they made this her profession because she's clearly admired at work. People look up to her. She's an expert at this sort of thing. And she knows they still won't listen to her. This isn't some woman off the street who got thrown into this place that they don't know. They won't even listen to somebody that they know this well. I think that speaks volumes in itself.
Well, and like a good real world example I was just watching a few weeks ago, there was that video. Woman was on a Zoom call with a city council. She has a PhD in public health, and the commissioner that she was talking to refused to give her proper title, despite her repeatedly reminding him, I'm a doctor, please address me as a doctor, and he kept refusing. Just on, I don't know, I guess I'll call it on principle. I can't really call that a principled action, but so like that same basic idea, this hasn't gone away. This isn't anything new.
right.
They were, literally talking about a public health matter. They invite her to speak. She is a doctor in this, and they won't even acknowledge her expertise. And same thing with our protagonist here. She's awesome at what she does. They make that very clear. And nope, just, well, you're delusional. Isn't that sad?
I also have to wonder about the horror aspect of then questioning yourself. Who should I have listened to?
Mm-hmm.
Like Chloe, obviously, we find that out. But she can't go back to every case that she should have listened to. Not that all of them were the same, but you know what I'm saying? I think that would wear on you as well in a different way.
Yeah, as far as like, what did you miss?
Yeah. And I mean, clearly we don't want the movie to go there. That would be ridiculous. But like that scares the fuck out of me too. Like that moment, I just imagine her like being alone in her little room, thinking about like past patients and like running through what she could have missed. That's a level of horror that's creepy as fuck too.
Well, we covered, I guess sort of covered this before in Suspiria, as far as the psychiatrist that was there. The psychiatrist that was portrayed by Tilda Swinton in that film, of how he kind of was dealing with, to an extent, that same thing of he should have been listening to some of his patients because he was deeming that these women were delusional with the stories that they were coming and bringing in. and doesn't realize that, they weren't delusions. And I think that would add to it. But like you said, James, it would kind of detract from what you have there if there was a little bit too much of that in the film. But I think at least where the film ends up, where Chloe's out of the facility, Miranda is continuing on, but obviously has been changed by this, to where, her psychiatry or psychiatry practice goes beyond the living and now is going to involve, the dead. At least that's where they kind of leave the film, where she's continuing to see ghosts. That in itself would be one of those things that you could see as being another good story or another good direction for it to go, where it's, instead of looking for that stuff in those past files, having those things that have been missed by society is now where she's going to be heading.
But I think she'd have to, because she's never getting her license back.
Well, then you become was like an archaeological psychiatrist.
Yes.
It's like, how about treating patients? That's fine. I got this. But I mean, that's not all unlike what we do now with, case study and even the M&Ms and things of that nature that we do in the medical field now. So I wish they actually had explored that a little bit better. I actually think that would have been interesting. And actually, to me, that segues very nicely into my next point that I have on this. When I was watching this movie, and again, I was talking about why I like this movie so much, and it occurred to me that while this is at its core a ghost story, because ghost stories got a ghost, I actually think this movie would have worked without a ghost. Now, obviously, you need some sort of MacGuffin to spark the inciting incident, but I don't think it necessarily had to be a ghost to sell this as a horror movie, because the ghost isn't necessarily what's frightening about this movie. And in her particular case, the ghost in this movie acts almost more like a banshee, more as a herald than an actual threat.
Yeah.
And I would have been perfectly content with this movie not having a ghost in it whatsoever. I think it would have worked just fine. I mean, you could have called it clairvoyance, you could have called it whatever. I don't care. Whatever. I guess ghost works just as well as anything else. Gets you some jump scares in there too for funsies.
Right.
But
I mean, if you're going to go that route, you could easily have had the sheriff who's working with her husband. Spoilers. You could have had him kill the husband and frame her, and you could have gone from there and done the whole I have to clear myself even though the evidence is overwhelming. I think you're 100% right that you could do stuff like that. I think that this particular case makes Gothica what it is, but that's not to say it wouldn't be a better movie your way. So
it's possible, and I get the ghost element. I really do. I understand, because you want to make sure that there's a selling point to the audience. You want to make sure you're not cheating your audience. You want to make sure they understand, because obviously as the movie progresses, you unlock more information about what actually happened and all that stuff. You don't want your protagonist to come out and be like, "Oh no, she really is Norman Bates. She just snapped and brutally killed this guy." Psych. That's not fair. That's not fair to your audience. So I understand the ghost part for that particular, because it's comforting almost to a point where you're like, okay, we know there's something spooky going on here, and we'll see what that is. We'll follow you. We'll listen to you. So it takes a little bit of the responsibility off the audience a little bit, which I understand why doing that, but at the same time, I like my horror hard won. I like having to work for it and to really, have to believe it. I have to follow it. I want to make sure we get to where I think we're going to go, if that makes sense. And
right.
And I really applaud those more, I'm going to call it highbrow horror. That's really pretentious of me, but I really applaud those stories, because they do make you, it's like, have some faith. We'll get there. Just stay with us. And I think this movie could have gone from a pulp oh yeah, that movie, to one that, is talked about beyond just this podcast. Because I do think it's worth talking about. And I think that could have taken it there, but it would have been harder for the audience to to swallow. So maybe I'm just projecting my own standards onto something that I shouldn't be, because that's not fair.
I will say all of the jump scares that were amazing were the ghost. So you'd lose that aspect.
You do.
And while I'm not a huge jump scare guy, I love the one in the pool. The pool was fantastic. That's one of the best jump scares I've seen in a while.
It's true, especially because you know it's coming. You know it's coming.
You do. And the timing is totally off, which just like fucks with you more. And I love when people take the time to take into account that someone like me knows the count and how long when it's going to hit, And when you fuck with that, it's so much better.
It is.
So,
and I actually, for that element too, it reminds me a lot of like the Insidious movies and even The Conjuring, basically anything James Wan does. Because that man can time a jump scare like he's Mozart. I mean, it's perfect. Just the right amount of subversion, just the right amount of it's there. Oh, not quite. Oh, well, there it is. Ha! Gotcha. Which is what you want, because you want it to bring you to the edge of your seat. You want it because you need that jolt. You need that anxiety,
right? And
that's what makes movies like Gothika, I think, better than people give it credit for, because it does that really, really well. And I don't see how they could have done any more or any less to make it just perfect. It worked beautifully. And no, I agree with you, James, on that one. That's the perfect jump scare. And actually segueing once again, because we're going to do that. And I have a feeling this was not intentional. This was just me probably over analyzing.
What's that like? I've never done that.
Really? I know. I can just imagine the writer of this listening to this going like, what? This is a ghost story. What are you talking about? But the water elements in this movie, there's a lot of water in this movie. For a movie that doesn't take place in or around water, there's a lot of water. To me, it reminds me a lot of that, really, and this could be a reference to its time back in 2003, a lot of J-horror kind of feels regarding the water. Because every time water appears in this movie, nothing good comes of it. Like, ever. At all.
Yeah, the shower scene and
Yeah, the shower scene, the pool scene, the rainstorm in the beginning. Doesn't matter. If you see water, it's not a good omen whatsoever. And I don't know if that was intentional. It probably wasn't. Water's just an easy, thematic element to throw in there, and I could be reading very much into that more than I should be. But I actually liked that. It reminded me in the best possible way of The Sixth Sense. Back when it was still new, back when it was still something we talked about favorably. Like every time you saw red, for instance, in that movie, there was ghost activity, which you don't really realize until after the fact. You're like, oh crap, yeah, red, bad things. And this movie has a lot of that with the water. You have the rainstorm, the murder happens, and you have the shower scene where she has her freak out, let's call it. And the pool scene, and then later on when she's remembering the actual murder taking place and she's in the bathtub that's really overly full, which gives me way too much anxiety. I don't know why that bothers me so much, but the fact that she's in a tub that's just like filled to the absolute brim, like if she moves in the slightest, it's going to spill water everywhere. That alone is enough to get me all riled up, and that was not intentional at all. So filmmakers out there, that's a great way to get me all just on edge. It's just overly fill a bathtub. You just know it's gonna spill. But anyway, I don't know if the water has anything to do with anything, but I just found it really interesting that they combined that in there. But it made me think of movies like The Ring and what was that Jennifer Connelly movie, the Dark Water movie. I can't remember now what that was called, but I don't know. I found that interesting. Like I said, it probably wasn't intentional at all, but it was a good thematic tie-in.
I mean, it really might be, though, because there's so much fire as well. Mm-hmm. Like, Rachel's on fire when we meet her. And when she makes the transitions, she's on fire. The tattoo has fire. The way he goes out has fire, So, I mean, I don't think it's a big stretch at all to say that this was probably purposeful. I don't know, but it works really well. So if it wasn't, if I was the writer, I would take full credit for it and be like, fuck yeah, that's what I was going for, man.
No, they're listening to this right now saying like, you guys got it. Yeah.
You're the only ones who were smart enough. No, I'm just kidding.
18 years, I can die happy.
No one ever says that about me. So, and then, even the blue light that's constantly different places, like that's got a watery aspect to it as well, as I'm thinking about it. So I don't know.
Yeah, it does. So I don't know. I've always tried to like find that stuff now, and it's interesting because even if it wasn't intentional, let's just say for the sake of argument it wasn't, and that's just the writer was like, there is water, she's in the tub. It's interesting to me, at least, just from as a writer, it's interesting to me to think about that. I'm like, so what's this guy's problem with water? Like, what's his deal with water? Why would that upset him quite so much? Why would that relate to it? I don't know. But like to me, I'd always look for that stuff. And that's why I really cling on to these psychological or psychiatrically minded stories of, like what's the deeper stuff here? What's the DSM here? Where's the history? Where's the either from the character's point of view or even the writers themselves? Like what gets you all hot and bothered here? Well, why that? Why does that freak you out?
I think the water itself, and maybe I'm reaching on this one. It's because it's a disruptor, right? I mean, for some people it's calming, but depending on the source of the water and the way it interacts with the scene or whatever else is going on, it can be a disruptor or a multiplier. So, even going into the shower scene, in bypassing the rain. Well, hell, I'm not going to bypass it. But, while she's driving, you got the rain, you got all this stuff going on, right? You got slick roads, possibly losing control of your car. The sinkhole forms, and possibly because of the storm and everything that's going on. You've got all these things that rain and water can do that can cause a lot of damage, right? And someone, it was one of these things on social media where they basically said, "Oh, it's so funny that we run from when it's raining, we run to get out of the water, but then we won't hesitate to sink down into a tub." And someone replied and said, "I don't get in the tub fully clothed. I'm comfortable, as far as in the clothing that I'm in. But as soon as that gets hit by water and I become drenched, I'm uncomfortable. I'm clammy. I'm wet. I'm possibly cold. Or if it's warm out, it's sticky and I just don't feel right." So, I think it's a good sensory, or at least a good way to have some type of sensory relationship with it. Because that definitely would disrupt a lot of things for her. If you even think about a shower itself, it's supposed to be calming, supposed to be soothing, right? For the most part. And you have this calming, soothing moment because the nurse even says, "Go on in there and wash off your sins," which I thought was a funny, strange line to deliver, but not in this context, because it's 3 days after she allegedly has killed her husband. And this is the nurse's way of, I guess, dealing with her. But she's going in there, and at first it's kind of this calming sensation and is quickly disrupted by, Rachel showing up. And so it's no longer a comfortable situation. It's no longer fun, relaxing. I mean, despite like 30 other people being in there with you, it changes.
I think that scene's so weird because so many of them would have been her former patients. It's just really odd.
No, I was that whole scene. I mean, aside from, again, the way she's interacting with water initially, that whole scene is just weird to me.
It really is.
Yeah, and I get a tremendous amount of discomfort watching that scene, and not for any particular reason. It just makes me uneasy just seeing it. I just don't. I don't enjoy that at all. I couldn't tell you why.
Well, I think. I mean, this is why I felt uncomfortable with it. It might be why you felt uncomfortable with it. It's the idea of it. It seems like those patients' humanity is gone in that moment, right?
Yeah.
When they're in the meeting with Miranda or whoever else happens to be a therapist, whether it's Robert Downey Jr. they're being seen individually, right? They're in their rooms by themselves. And this is the one moment that you see them all together. And it's when they're most vulnerable. They're all naked. They're all, being sprayed with water. And if you're naked and shower, you're very vulnerable at that moment. And now you've got all these other people around with you. I think it's just unsettling to watch. And I think that's possibly a good use of that scene by the director or the writer to make the audience uncomfortable as well.
Yeah, like for me, I've worked in psych hospitals for a number of years, and that's not how showers are at all. They're all individualized and, that kind of thing. Like you don't have your own, but there's one shower and one person uses it at a time, but it really kicks up the horror. Like I didn't, that part of me was like bullshit, but like the writer in me is like amazing. This is such a great way to build tension and anxiety. And it really also gives you the feel that this place is more like a prison and less like it's trying to help people. And I don't know about you guys, but it gave me total like Auschwitz kind of vibes and stuff like that as well. And that also really raises the anxiety and horror.
Well, it must be, because it's really hard to take a group shower scene and make it one of the most unsexy things ever put to film. That might be apropos of nothing, but I mean, that does speak to just truly how uncomfortable it is, because you have 30 naked women in a room showering, right? Like should be something, let's say, scintillating, at least in some way, shape, or form. But it absolutely wasn't. Like you said, it was degrading. It was dehumanizing. It was, I don't know, like even the way the bodies looked, like they looked like they were writhing almost, like all grouped together, like the way they were. And it just sets me on, like even just talking about it right now, it just sets me on edge. Like it's so good. Like it's so well done. And it that to me, like it harkens to like some of the better parts of like body horror that we see nowadays, from the Saw franchises, or anything that Twisted Pictures does. It's not the gore necessarily. It's not that, because like we're pretty desensitized to that. But that imagery of bodies together like that, moving in ways that we're not used to seeing, it's profoundly disturbing. It really is. And it makes you, in one sense, repulsed by what you're seeing, but at the same time, you also are like, these are people. Like, I'm being made to feel this about these people. Like, that's not right. Like, this is, I think it gives you some of that forced empathy in that moment. And God, I think that's just really well done. And again, to talk about truly what makes horror. And it's actually funny we're talking about that. I talked about that today with a coworker, because she was telling me, she's like, oh, I can't watch scary movies. And I was like, okay, that's fair. But it's like, but have you watched horror movies that aren't scary? And she looked at me like I was crazy. and I was like, horror and scary are not the same thing, right? At all. No. They're completely separate stuff. I've seen plenty of comedies that terrified me. Like, it scared the hell out of me. But they aren't horror at all. It's like, horror isn't scary. It can be. It's easy, but it's not necessary. And to me, I think that shower scene has every element you need to make, like, you could write a short movie just on that scene alone. That 5-6 minutes, however long it was, that's perfect. That's a whole horror story right there, self-contained.
Yeah, because even the symbolism of losing yourself, like everything that makes her is gone. Like, even when we know Penelope Cruz is in this shower with her, we can't find her right away.
Right.
Like, we see shots of her and then she's gone in the crowd. Like, you completely, they just nailed losing yourself and having no piece of individualism here.
No, absolutely. And I think of ourselves, that's also terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
At least on some level we can't reach, on some level we can't touch. And a lot of like my psychological background has been in studying personalities, and I never realized how controversial personality really is with people until you actually start kind of poking at it. And it makes some people very, very uncomfortable for various reasons. Like you tell people like, okay, this is your personality. If you're going through like the, let's say the Myers-Briggs, for instance, that's the popular culture one right now. you're one of these 16 people. Well, that freaks some people the hell out. Like they can't stand that idea of like, like you're so much not an individual. You are like 1/16 of the population. Congratulations. It reaches that same part in some of those people, like that writhing shower scene of you're a mass. You're not an individual. You're just one of this grouping. You're not a real person. You're just, you're a pigeonhole. You're a number. And people don't like that at all. I mean, on some level, that really deeply, profoundly bothers the hell out of people, and as it should. And now most of that comes from misunderstanding, but the effect is still the same. They are still very much terrified, and they probably should be. That idea of losing oneself, losing what makes you,
Mm-hmm.
That concept of that. It's what makes us scared of cults, and what makes us scared of, extreme religions and things of that nature. It's all the same stuff. You have to give up yourself to this mass, and it's frightening, at least to some people.
Yeah, I mean, even zombies, like you become part of the horde and you're not yourself. Like, I don't think that it's about dying with zombies. It's the fear of you keep living, but you're not you.
Right.
Yeah,
And,
that's a good point.
Yeah, so I'm like looking at it like Halle Berry's character, or however Don said it earlier.
Halle Berry.
But like you'd have that same thing, and I think that is such peak horror. But like we get both sides of this with her, because we get to watch her lose herself, but we also see how she clings to the pieces that she still has control over.
Right.
And that always fascinates me in films as well. Like this, I mean, that's just storytelling, but like, I find it amazing how that's what survival is. It's keeping that piece of you that can hopefully save yourself. And I don't know where the fuck I was going with that, so I'll just be quiet now.
I was gonna say that was a good place to go with it, because, I mean, then that becomes a coping because I wrote down coping mechanisms and things like that. And the way that people try to survive, right? Because earlier in the film, Charles Dutton, and of course I forget his name, but Charles Dutton's character, who's Miranda's husband, when they're having this interaction, he gives this whole speech about a mirror, said, which one is you, which one is the mirror, or which one is you and which one is the reflection, because a mirror is going to determine that. And I'm God. And when that happens, you almost have this sense of she's stuck at this moment of trying to determine whether or not she's the real Miranda, or if that other thing was a dream from before, or what else is going on. Because she even has a few moments early on where she keeps telling herself, like, I'm dreaming, none of this is real, I'm dreaming. And still trying to figure out what exactly the hell is going on, because the only thing that would make sense is that she's trapped in a nightmare, right? Because she still is that doctor. She still is that person. And she has to figure out a way to get that person to be seen by those other people. So I say you're going, you have a strong point with that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. I'll act like that was my plan. No. Go ahead, Jason.
And actually, it's it kind of feeding into that. One of my bigger notes here, I actually even underlined it just to make sure I really highlighted it. Going back with what Dawn was saying about, she's still a doctor. She's trying to emphasize all this. And to me, another, besides the whole what's real, what's not real, the other really big horror element that I think is universal to absolutely everybody is the shaking of your faith. And I don't mean necessarily in a religious sense. Your faith can be in anything, because we all have a doctrine. We all have a set of ethos and ethics and morals and everything that we do that says this is who we are. This is our creed. This is it. This is,
right.
What you might call your soul, whatever. That's who I am. So to have the very bedrock of what makes you you as an individual away from everybody else, to have that shaken. And you see that in this movie. She goes over that several times. You see her, she actually says, okay, this is a dream process, primary focus. Like, she goes through all this. You can see her like basically going through her textbooks in her head. And that is her ethos. That is her faith. Her faith is in psychiatry. Her faith is in science and the scientific method, in medicine, in disease progression and everything. And that is obviously a very profound foundation for any person to live off of. But to have it shaken literally the first day after something happens to you, to have your faith tested over and over and over and over by people that, again, are close to you, that care about you, that hold you in esteem, and you hold them in esteem. And to have that rocked quite so often is just profoundly disturbing. I wish more people did that.
Really fast, I want to go back to the water because I was thinking about something else.
Go for it.
Like, if you think about how fire is related to the bad guys here, right? And then water is Rachel, and it's Halle Berry's character, whose name I just lost.
Miranda.
And thank you, Miranda. So, like, when she goes in the pool, when she's escaping everybody, she's literally saving herself in water. And I think that also has something there with what we were talking about earlier. Like, the water is almost, it's comforting and it saves you, but you can't control it. And the more I think about it, the more I really like the water in this. But I thought it was interesting that she's running from the fire side of this by hiding in water, literally. And Rachel's in there with her. It's just terrifying to us.
Well, yeah, imagine that you're trying to get help and all you speak is Portuguese, and everyone around you speaks English, and you're screaming that you love them in Portuguese. That would be terrifying. Doesn't matter what your actual message is.
Right.
Or if you scream it in Russian.
Yeah, that's even more frightening. So I can understand how, like, they're trying to pierce the veil and communicate, and you don't speak human anymore. That'd be very frustrating.
That's a problem.
Yeah, that's not good. There's no translation there. And I think those elements, that kind of stuff with this movie, the fact that this isn't a one-trick pony, this isn't just a typical horror, that most horror stories you see, even good ones, have one, maybe two things, and that's their thing. That's what they're shooting for. That's what they're going with, and come along with us, and we'll take you through this.
Right.
But this one hits. God, there's like 8 of them, but it doesn't feel crowded. It doesn't feel busy. It doesn't. It's like I look at a movie to compare that to in somewhat an unfavorable. As much as a fan as I am of the Insidious movies, the Last Key, I think, was the most recent one.
Mm-hmm.
Not one of my favorite movies, and I think mostly because it feels crowded. It feels like one of those. It's all over the place. It touches on 8 different things, but it does it in such in a way that I was confused. I feel like I had to have like a flow chart to keep track of where we were going with everything. But Gothica doesn't do that. It takes you through pretty organically through, okay, we have, I just killed someone horror. That's frightening. And then there's the, oh shit, I'm locked up in here and they think I'm crazy. That's horror there. And then you have, it keeps hitting these over and over. You're basically going through like the 8 stages of horror when something bad happens to you. That's trademark and copyrighted. I'm going to write that. That element of, you go through, there's the deniability, and then there's the, oh crap, am I really crazy? Did I really do this? You hit all of this stuff, all in the span of, what was it, an hour and 40 minutes?
Yeah, something like that.
And then at the end, you even have slasher moments. You have the big scary goon is chasing after you, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's great for something to be able to take something in such a short amount of time and to believably and satisfactorily go over 8 different styles of horror in an hour and 10 minutes. Like that's impressive. And this actually has nothing to do with anything, but since I mentioned him, can we talk about how amazing John Carroll Lynch is in literally anything he does?
Go for it. Tell us about your love.
I have I have what could be considered a heterosexual man crush on John Carroll Lynch. He's great in this movie. Like, and obviously he wasn't really the point of this movie at all, right? It just, it's kind of almost even tacked on, which sounds dismissive. It's not the intention, but he's not really the point of this. But in that final 10 minutes of the movie where he comes out as the living, he's the oogie boogie that's left that you have to deal with. Right. But he does such a good job of, like, as soon as he realizes that she knows what's going on, he doesn't necessarily know it's him, but he gets it. He's like, crap, this is up now. To watch him shift from the shucks, good old boy sheriff, which I absolutely bought, by the way. The first time I watched this movie, I saw him as a good cop who truly was hurt by the death of his friend and was incredulous at this. You could see literally a switch in him where he goes from, shucks, sheriff, I got your back, to, well, jig is up, now I gotta go Red Dragon on her ass. That's great. And I truly felt his menace, especially because this is a guy, if anyone who's listening doesn't know John Carroll Lynch, he's not a fit man by any means. He's comfortably middle-aged. He's got dad bod for days. But to see him rip off his shirt and just lumber through the sheriff's department trying to find her to kill her, it works so well. And I use the Red Dragon reference specifically because it does to me recall back to that Red Dragon movie and that Silence of the Lambs idea of just this truly predatory monster of a person, and the just that again, that real horror that it's hard to do, because like you take it like someone like Jason from not me from the Friday the 13th movies. I'm not frightening at all. But you take Jason Voorhees, he's frightening because he's an act of nature. He's a force of nature. He's a monolith. He's inhuman and everything. So yeah, we're scared of him because we know he will kill us if we give him long enough to do it. But what makes someone like John Carroll Lynch's character so frightening is that he's just a man, not even that impressive of one really. But he's still. I felt very threatened by him. I felt very uneasy and uncomfortable with him. And any man who gets religious imagery tattooed on his chest is not someone that you want to, look twice at. That takes some commitment, because that shit hurts.
Yep,
it's commitment to your depravity. So, like I said, this movie, again, just to tilt to the hat of this movie of being able to add, again, just a slasher element, even in 5 minutes, believably, into the end of this movie is kudos. Bravo.
Well, and the interesting thing with, going through the 8 stages of horror, as you called it, like, none of it feels forced. Like, you brought up Last Key, and my problem with Last Key is that it feels forced. It feels like they were trying to jam too much into this instead of making another movie and stretching it out. And this doesn't have that. Everything just builds off each other, and it just moves along. I mean, yeah, I called it utterly implausible, but once you let go of that, everything makes sense. Each piece works with the next piece. And when you talk the greatness of John Carroll Lynch, like, what I love about that scene when he's in the cell with her is he transitions without changing. He goes from a believable, I mean, you know by this point, but like, he goes from this believable sheriff to an absolute terror. And I swear to God, he didn't fucking change anything. He's just like, well, gotta kill you now, and gets up and tries. Like, it's flawless. So many actors couldn't pull off that transition the way that it works. And I've seen him in a lot of stuff where he's one or the other. So watching that together within like 30 seconds was just fucking fantastic.
No, absolutely. And I think something like that is far more terrifying than, like, I look at like a Willem Dafoe type of actor, as someone from that camp who can just dial it to 11 beautifully, you know what I mean? But that would have just turned this into a parody. It would have ruined it. It would have turned it into just a mockery of itself. You'd have been like, really? Like, you would have felt cheated to have this kind of a not really a slow burn, but a very steady burn to this big show off at the end, and to have someone just go from zero to Defoe would have been a betrayal. It would have been like a Jesus Christ, really? This guy got away with this for the last 40 years? You got to be shitting me. But again, a dad bod sheriff, from Billings, Montana, or whatever, like that's believable.
Well, and look at his partner. His partner's same thing. Like, you don't think these two are going out doing this stuff, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to be this sick, drifter who's going through town who had been doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think that's one of the hallmarks that makes this movie good. Is it's the understatedness. It's the great casting. It's the way they do it in a very deliberate manner. And I think that's one thing that horror doesn't have enough of, is that deliberateness. And I've been looking for an excuse to bring this into it, but like any horror that like Guillermo del Toro does, mm-hmm. It has that very deliberate pace. You never feel rushed. You never feel mm-hmm. like it's out of control. You're just like, you're going along with it. You're like, it's structured like fairy tales. You're like, okay, there's a beat to this. There's a rhythm to this. We'll trust it. And if we write it out, we're going to be satisfied by the ending. Even if the ending's terrible, it doesn't matter. We're okay with it because we buy it. And I think this movie does that really, really well. And that's something I think a lot of modern horror doesn't do well. It does great like in the second act with it, but then they get rushed to the ending and they want a big frantic climax. And and I love Blumhouse movies, I really do, but they're guilty of this a lot. They do that. They rush the ending, and it goes from deliberate to frenetic just out of nowhere, and it just doesn't work. Bring back more dad bods killers. Like we need more of that, because that terrifies me, because I just see my dad chasing after me with an axe and I'm like, Jesus Christ, he really could do that. And you buy it more. You're sold into it. Then when she does defeat the big baddie, you're like, hell yeah, fuck you. Like we won, and I think that's great. I think that's the perfect amount of satisfaction and closure that you would look for. And this movie does a really good job. And I keep kind of, sounds like I'm almost defending it, but I don't think this movie again got a fair shake. Now, again, we have 18 years of looking back on it in perspective, but I think more people could learn from watching something like this and taking cues from this, of like this very real, very believable. Again, take the ghost out of it. I mean, it works for this, but even without the ghost, it's a very grounded, very real. I'm gonna use that word visceral, even though I hate using that to describe anything. But it feels tangible. It feels, you're like, yeah, of course, yeah, this is messed up. Should we check the hospitals? Maybe there's someone in there who shouldn't be in there. Like I think that's great. And I think it's a good idea to see something like this, to learn how to show vulnerability, but with that same determination. Because Halle Berry does not play a weak or broken character, which you see a lot in horror. This person who's just, like you have to coddle and protect, and like she has no protector in this movie. No. The closest thing she has to this is the Robert Downey Jr. character, and he's a wet napkin at the best of times.
I mean, he's there to be the red herring, and he does that well.
He does,
and I feel like he should have been more developed. Like, I really feel like, I don't know, there's something really missing from this. I could have used like 5 minutes more of their interactions before this all went down, because when they get to like, did you want to have an affair with me? Why didn't we? Like, it didn't. That's the one thing that felt really fucking forced to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, there's some light, like, little nods to tension at the beginning. I would have liked something more, not like them fucking each other, but like, he just seemed like he was a creepy coworker following a girl around. And then we get to, oh yeah, I wanted you too. And that felt weird to me. So, but again, I think he's there to be the red herring. So if you go with the creep factor, that kicks that up. So I don't know.
I think it's part that, and he was just starting his comeback, as far as, all the addiction issues he had. So I think it was an issue of, we're bringing him in, right? he's a known actor. Yeah, he is going to be the red herring, but we're not going to give him that much of a role because we want to go ahead and, take advantage of him being the red herring, as opposed to we have a bunch of, and we don't keep it vague. If we have him there too much, he's not going to be vague enough to where you start thinking like, well, shit, maybe he killed her because he killed her husband because he wanted to have sex with her, wanted to have that affair. So it can still stay there. But if we have too much of him, there's too much interaction, I guess it starts to ruin it. But are you ready for the best segue I've ever done on this show? Oh, shit.
Would you say Robert was looking for his big break?
Oh, God.
Why would you do that?
Oh.
Run with it, Don. I know you want to.
Okay. When this movie came out, I was very pissed off at Robert Downey Jr. because my first thought was, I remember watching this guy in 80s movies. I loved him in all the shit that was out, Weird Science, all that stuff, right? Loved watching that. Then I was like, God, he's very talented. He screwed it up as far as he's got addiction. He's dealing with that stuff. And so, this is still in that period in the 90s and even the early 2000s where you're still blaming the person, which, again, I'm going to say don't do that because people with addiction issues need help. They don't need to be put in prison as opposed to, what we kind of do with people now. And so even then I was like, gosh, this guy's an asshole. He's been given so many chances. He gets in this movie and he breaks Halle Berry's arm. And because he got, I guess allegedly the story is like they were shooting a scene. He got a little, not that he intentionally got rough, but he mishandled the scene and unintentionally broke her arm. And so as a fan of Halle Berry, I was upset with him at that moment. But yeah, thanks for the joke, James, asshole.
I couldn't resist. It was there.
I mean, you have to have at least one like behind the scenes story, and there wasn't much about this one except that.
Yeah, no peeing in jars in this movie.
No, not
oh
so
man,
much.
I forgot all about that.
And
if
for
you don't
the record,
know about peeing in jars, go listen to our Zodiac episode.
apparently Halle Berry still has not forgiven him. By the way,
no, and
she's still mad at him.
But I mean, this got to be like, I mean, we all know where Robert Downey Jr. went from here, but like in that moment, like, wouldn't there be part of you that's like, fuck, I was on my way back. I made this mistake. Not him. No, he's like, fuck your arm. I was acting. Amazing.
And then just 5 years later, he was Tony Stark.
Yes.
So look at that.
Side note, I still believe that Robert Downey Jr. had no idea they were filming during the beginning of Iron Man. He was just in a car, drinking, running his mouth. Anyway.
I'd like to believe that. That would make me happy to believe.
It's my headcanon for Iron Man.
Is that kind of like the Gary Oldman theory of like, imagine you're going around shopping and then you get to the end of the day and someone yells cut?
and you were Gary Oldman?
And you're Gary Oldman.
If only I could be that talented.
There is one thing I want to get into because we touched on it, and it goes back to Dr. Miranda Gray's profession, where she is sitting in that cell with the sheriff, and that's a great scene because we talked about his portrayal. But it's also a great interaction between those two characters because as Dr. Gray is, going over trying to figure out who the killer is, right? And of course, Sheriff Ryan is sitting there like, oh, fuck, please don't let her guess me. Please don't let her guess me. And she starts diagnosing the killer. It says, this is who it would be. It would be this, 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 and this. And then he has this moment where, of course, he reveals himself through the, at least through the viewer, you're seeing like he's absorbing all this, listening, and he says that one line of like, yeah, that was really good, except for that part about torturing animals or harming animals. I never got into that, and it's a really good, not necessarily gotcha moment in the film, on her part or on his part, but it's a great moment where you're seeing how even in this moment, she's gone back to thinking that she's safe and she's oblivious to the power that this guy has at that moment, to where any other movie, and I'm sure, because I saw it on video, I didn't see it in the theater. Sorry, kids, those of you who are listening. I saw it on video. I think it was still on VHS back then.
What's that?
Yeah. But it was this moment where if you're watching I imagine the people who are watching this in the movie theater were sitting like, what the fuck are you doing? That's him. You don't know that it's him? And just watching her diagnose him as the killer and not realizing that she's actually diagnosing the actual killer that everyone is probably out there looking for. But even another good jump scare was when she was in that rape room, that snuff room, and the young lady is still in the room. The sheriff's deputy has her. She's got that knife, and that girl like jumps out from underneath the stairs and grabs and is like, "Help me!" It was a great moment because you don't know if they had any other bodies in there. You don't know the last time that someone may have been in there, because we're looking at 3 days since she killed her husband, or since Rachel killed her husband with her body. And how long has that young lady been there? Because obviously she couldn't get out. But even the way that these two men preyed on women themselves, I found remarkable. And I don't mean remarkable in a positive sense. I just mean remarkable as far as putting themselves in this position where they understood that they could continue to abuse women. He's the warden, his buddy is the sheriff. So just think about all the number of people that this sheriff probably plucked out and said, "Oh, this would be a good one." And they isolated these women or took women and used them in the prison or whatever they happen to do. Which, by the way, I don't know what you guys thought about the prison, the psych ward. My experience is from a distance, but the two of you work in behavioral health. What did you think of the prison, the psych ward, the way it was set up? Because for me, I just wondered what their budget was.
So, like James, obviously I have worked in hospitals, and I've been in state hospitals with people in that type of situation where they're there for criminal holdings. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that hospitals do not look like that. They don't. I actually remember thinking alternatively, looking this movie, watching it, taking my time between going, this is a really nice facility, way more nice than a state hospital should be. And then, of course, as the movie goes along, I'm like, okay, this is way crappier than even a low-funded state hospital should be. And I take umbrage with some of these movies that have they basically repurpose these old prisons or whatever they were. Mm-hmm. To show these things. So like movies like this one and like Shutter Island and that stuff. Now Shutter Island gets a pass because it took place in the 50s. Yeah. But they're not like this, folks. They're like every hospital you've ever seen. The only difference is the door's locked from the outside. That's basically it. They're just as tacky and plastic and just they smell bad. And like they're not atmospheric, they're not moody at all. They're a lot like that second apartment you lived in that you probably never should have moved into with that neighbor that you were pretty sure could see into your place. They're kind of more like that. They're very underfunded, and the staff don't give a shit. They don't. I'm sorry. They
and
don't.
Security is not like that.
No,
I'm not advocating for anybody to, try to get into one or anything, but there aren't 3 lock doors anywhere. That's fucking crazy.
No, and the security guy is a guy named Jerry who had a heart attack last year, and he had to take an easier job. It's always Jerry. Yeah, it's always Jerry. Think of Jerry from Parks and Rec. That's the security guard.
100%. Yes. Same hair even.
Yeah, same hair, same everything. Same like they're the nicest guys always. Like they're just super nice. They'll
And
get
they
you some
have
chips.
20 stories to tell you when you're trying to get somewhere.
every time. But I can see why it would be really hard to tell a convincing atmospheric horror story in what essentially amounts to an old age home without old people.
Yeah.
Because it just would ruin it for you. You'd be watching this, you'd be like, well, Jesus Christ, like, of course they're crazy. They live in this damn place eating frozen food that hasn't been properly cooked. That's...
And it's very similar. You have the lobby with the one TV and everybody arguing over what you're going to watch. And the one guy who's been there for 20 years. So he's like, no, every Tuesday at 7, we watch this.
We're watching Wapner. But as daytime TV, guys, it's never good. But it's, but I understand. I do as a writer, as a storyteller, I understand why they set these movies in these environments. I really do. Folks, if you ever have to go to a mental hospital, please understand that it's boring. It's boring. It's not exciting. It doesn't look like a Hellraiser hospital. It looks like your granny's old age home.
If you want out faster, keep it boring.
Yeah. Mental health is boring, guys.
The one thing I'll add to that is this is a double-edged sword for me, because as a writer, I love the gothic, crazy, like prison-like, gigantic church of a hospital, right? As a person who's worked in mental health for so long, I hate that in itself builds people's fear of getting help.
Yeah, it does.
So that's always a double-edged sword to me. The rest of it, I will say, so I worked like lockdown units, right? Like the worst of the worst, the murderers, that kind of stuff. And most of my stories are how I played cards for 8 hours. But anyway, at night I would work. I was always an overnight person. And sometimes I would just sneak away and explore the old areas of the hospital. And what's weird about some of these places, particularly like the state hospital in Nebraska, most of it is very newish and institutionalized, and it's white and clean and blah, blah, blah. And then you hit these areas where you can tell nobody's made any renovations in like almost 100 years. And that's horror to me. Like, that is such a weird feeling, because it's like fucking time traveling. It's like you open this one door you're not supposed to open, and you're in a place that looks like Gothica instead. And not all of them are that way. There's a lot of modern places that have been built recently. But yeah, some of the older ones, you get weird shit like that. Or you get Danvers State Hospital in New England, which was later converted to luxury apartments, and the Patriots lived there during the season, from what I hear. Not all of them, but some of them. So I guess you can modernize and do normal stuff like that too.
Yeah. And I have one more beef going on to this more technical aspect, and this is a general one. The way the mental health profession is portrayed. I have one positive and I have one negative on this in this terms of this movie.
Sweet.
Number one, on a positive note, at one point when Downey Jr. is doing one of his first interviews with our protagonist, I actually like the way they had him interact here. He approached her with a very casual approach. He was very just kind of friendly and non-committal with her. He didn't say a lot. He didn't make a lot of, he was wearing tennis shoes. Like, he just had kind of a realistic, like, this is what these guys actually do. They don't run around lab coats and all that crap like that.
I love that you noticed the shoes.
Yeah. But because I look for that, because every time I see these guys are always wearing like their brogue tasseled loafers, and you don't wear that crap. Like, unless you're in private practice or something, you don't wear that crap to the floor. You don't. You're wearing tennis shoes always, and heather socks.
Running, you're all over the place, and if something goes down, you need to be able to move.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's so that's a good thing. They actually portrayed them very accurately to how physically, their mannerisms and stuff. That's very good. My beef, though, with this, and this is a very nitpicky thing, no one took notes ever. ever.
Well, then none of it happened.
Ugh. All
If
these
there's no
sessions,
documentation, it didn't happen.
all of these times, they're all sitting there. No one took notes ever. People, they take notes. They take notes about their notes. If you're an aspiring horror writer listening to this, and you have a clinical professional of any type of variety, they take notes. Okay, constantly. Have your character have a notepad and a pen, because I guarantee you they have one. Put it in there. I will respect you for days.
And if you're writing a regular medical professional, have them stare at a laptop and never look up at you while they ask you 1,000 questions.
Yeah. So none of that happens. And I'm sorry, but the chief medical officer or warden or whatever they are do not have wood paneled offices.
Why is his wife like in the basement somewhere?
Right. It's like
he's like, look at my amazing office. You're over there.
Yeah. There's room for a couch. He has cognac or whatever. It's like, no. Like, come on. Like, stop doing this, guys. Stop romanticizing office spaces. Unless you're the CEO of a financial company, you do not have a nice office. I don't care who the hell you are.
Nope.
Your office is a broom closet. Even if you're the chief medical officer. That's just the way of things. House lied to you. Offices do not look like that.
Well, on top of that, like if my wife and I worked together like that and I left and I had an office like that, she'd go work in my office. She wouldn't go down to this crazy office in the middle of fucking nowhere down there.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So yeah, nitpicky stuff, but guys, do your research. Come on. You can do a little work. Work a little harder. Why do they always have wood paneled offices? I don't understand.
Maybe it's easy to put up, like on set. Maybe it's easy to pop that up. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never done it. I'm just throwing out random shit.
Yeah, I've never had an office, so I don't know. What do I know?
I had a really nice office, and then I started working from home, and now I don't care that I had a really nice office. But what'd you guys think of the scene where Miranda goes back to her house and learns the truth? Like, this is a little overboard for me. Like, I still dig it, and I like the scares, and I like some of it, but it kind of violates the tone of the rest of the film for me. I don't know. What did you guys think?
That, to me, that scene screams a producer said, we need this, and they just put it in. Maybe they let the first assistant director do it or something that day. I don't know. Like you said, I don't think it fits. I don't think it fits the theme of the movie. Like, even the way it's shot, the coloring about it, everything about it just felt off.
Yeah, it loses that blue light. Like, when she's learning the truth, when she's in different places, like there and the torture dungeon, whatever it's called, like they lose that blue light. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it feels weird because of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I could have done without it. Now, obviously, you kind of need it because it does set up the final confrontation. It leads her to Willow Creek, the slaughter barn. But I wish they had found a better way to do that. And I don't know. Again, to me, it screamed like, again, that felt to me like very much like one of those. The suits came by and said, "Hey, we need this because we got to spoon feed this. Make it obvious."
Well, and they could have gone to his office. She could have, when she was leaving the hospital. I mean, she could have. I don't know. They could have set it up to where she had to go by his office, and she sees, oh my God, Willow Creek, and then she drives out and realizes, oh shit, there's a rape room in here, and there's a video camera, and then there's a creepy message that he left for me that's actually not for me, but the audience won't know that until the end of the movie.
It's fucking weird, isn't it? No, that makes so much more sense, going to his office, because if you escape a mental institution, you probably shouldn't run directly to your own house. Mm-hmm. Just a fucking thought. Like, do you think they're not going to look for you there? Like, what a strange way to do this. And they could have saved on the set. They could have avoided all the licensing and insurance issues. I mean, they could have just done away with all that.
Yeah. And I did not need to see Charles S. Dutton's arm chopped in half. I didn't need that for this movie. Now, I have no problem with it in general, but I don't think it was necessary. It didn't add anything. So to me, that felt like studio interference. You know,
So
you can
this is where
always tell.
this is where Rachel went wrong. She should have jumped into Halle Berry's body, followed him out to Willow Creek, killed him in the rape dungeon, and then like when people showed up and were like, "Damn, she killed her husband," it wouldn't even matter. They'd look around and be like, "Well, yeah." See? Rachel did not think this out.
Well, we talked about how hard it is to pierce the veil. So maybe it just maybe she was doing like the Patrick Swayze ghost training.
Oh man.
For a couple years trying to get it like, okay, I got this. Let's do this now. I'm ready. And she did the best she could. She's trying.
She should have run to Guinan and had her help.
Yes, this is true. Or the creepy guy in the train station.
God.
I'm gonna now relate every ghost movie to the movie Ghost. Every time.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's gonna be my barometer now.
So I think that pretty much burned all of our notes. So I have one question left. Why the fuck is this called Gothica? Just because of the Gothic architecture? Like, this has nothing to do with the film. That's my biggest complaint.
James, I'm going to beat you up. I swear I am. The term Gothic refers to when someone is able to see an apparition or a ghost no one else can.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I did not know that.
And
that's
now
pretty
you
fantastic. I'm not even going to edit this out. I'll just be the idiot that didn't know that. I'm fine with that. Huh.
Plus, you have it on record that I said I was going to beat you up.
Jason, any final thoughts?
This is definitely one of those movies that needs to be watched again through the lens of now. You don't look at it from the very obvious early 2000s issues it has with the overly blue saturation on everything. If you're not David Fincher, don't do that. You can't pull it off. But taking away the coloring motifs and again the product of its time stuff, looking at the just the pure horror of it from today's perspective, I actually think there's more to this than people originally gave it credit for. So if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it for a long time, try to forget what you saw and just watch it again fresh while ignoring all of our spoilers, and just try to experience it and actually take it as a horror movie and not as a Halle Berry movie from 2003.
All right, so that brings us to the part of the show where we list some movies, and Don usually has, 35 of them. So Jason, would you like to go first?
No problem. So I don't have that many recommendations, but I have some different ones and for different reasons. Actually, for me, the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking, like, if you like this, why don't you try watching? The first thing that came to mind for me was actually The Cell, which I think is another wonderfully underexplored horror movie for a lot of the same reasons. You have a good, strong, technically minded female lead exploring, dark subject matter. It's structured very much the same way. It has a lot of the same kind of DNA and feel to it. Plus, again, one of the finest performances by Vincent D'Onofrio ever put on film. It's worth it just for that alone. Very disturbing. It has more body horror to it. It's not for the faint of heart. It also has Vince Vaughn in it, so take that at face value if you're easily frightened by Vince Vaughn. But it's a good movie in a lot of the same ways. It explores a lot of the same stuff. It's a really good segue for thematically, if that's what you're looking for.
Cool.
In my not so humble opinion. And then another one for me that came to mind was, and unfortunately these days you almost can't get away from this. Anytime you start talking about psychiatric hospitals and possession and all that stuff, I'm going to bring up Session 9. I know that's kind of a hot button one for some people for some reason. I don't know why that's controversial, but
I don't know either. Yeah.
Some people are just they're mad at it. Maybe just because David Caruso's in it. I don't know. But that's another good one of talking about kind of deep diving into something bad happened here, what actually happened. And it has some of the possession elements to it too, but that's kind of secondary. But if you kind of like that more psych hospital, bad things happen, what do we do? that's actually a pretty good one to watch. It's kind of one of those movies though. It's one and done. Once you've seen it once, unfortunately, it does not have a lot of rewatchability, but it's it's definitely worth seeing for that, if nothing else. And again, from a possession point of view, I know people don't like this movie, but I don't care. I love it. Was that Eric Bana movie, Deliver Us from Evil? I really liked that movie, like a lot. I think that movie does possession in a very grounded reality way that we don't see in movies a lot. You know, a lot of our stuff now with possession always comes down to Catholicism, like every time. And this, don't get me wrong, Deliver Us from Evil has that, but it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't have that same kind of feel to it. So if you're looking for more possession, you know, kind of feel gritty, that kind of stuff, Deliver Us from Evil is really good for that. And then the last recommendation I have, and just because for reasons, The Ward by the John Carpenter movie. It's from right around the same time. It doesn't share a lot of DNA with this movie, but you know, if you liked Gothica, or if you want to look at movies that are like it or have the same kind of feel to it, The Ward, while not John Carpenter's best, definitely worth watching.
Excellent. Don, what do you got?
Oh, come on, James, you go, because you might take one of mine.
All right. So you mentioned The Sixth Sense earlier, and I don't know if you know this, but I have an ongoing war with The Sixth Sense where I'm mad that Stir of Echoes isn't the one that's super popular instead. So Stir of Echoes, 100%. I love Stir of Echoes, and it really fits this. I would say Shutter Island, but you know, we've already said that 900 times. The Lodge. I don't know if either of you have seen The Lodge, but I really liked that. And Identity.
Oh,
which I don't want to talk about Identity because I don't know who knows. And watch Identity.
Yeah, and Identity is one of those ones we never would do spoiler. We have to no spoilers on that one at all because that's just.
That would literally be like 10 minutes of us going, look, there's going to be fucking spoilers. So no, turn it off now. And then my final one is Moon. And there's no reason. It doesn't tie in at all. I just love Moon and I keep trying to push it to everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kevin Spacey's in it, so that's terrifying.
So.
All right. Well, I have a few here. And of course, I had Shutter Island on my list as well. But that's not the only one I have. The first one I started with was Skeleton Key with Kate Hudson.
Forget about that one.
Again, I look at that one as a heavily underrated, as far as where the film goes, the depth that it goes into. Not necessarily as far as like the acting and the story, anything like that, but it has some really good things that again, I don't even want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, who's listening. Ghost Ship, because from the same company. Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland.
Really fast. Ghost Ship has like my favorite opening scene ever.
Oh yeah, it's outstanding.
Well,
it's outstanding.
Well, Tag, the Japanese movie Tag, has my favorite opening scene, but Ghost Ship is definitely in my top 3. Yeah.
Secret Window with Johnny Depp. Let's see.
I almost talked about that one.
What Lies Beneath with Harrison Ford and I think Michelle Pfeiffer. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's along the same lines as this movie, aside from it's not in a psych ward. Split, 13 Ghosts. I'm surprised James didn't say that, considering the glass doors in this movie.
Also by the same company.
Yep. Devil.
You can hear more about that in our 13 Ghosts episode.
Yes. Devil, Orphan. I've got in this as well, as far as like the idea of you don't exactly know who is who and what's going on. Don't Say a Word. Not the best movie, but as far as discussing trauma and mental illness and things like that. Room 1408. And if you like the director who made this film, Cassavetes, he had another film earlier in his career called La Haine, which translated out as The Hate, and it has to deal with societal issues and marginalized communities in France. Really well done in that film. And that's what I got.
Cool. What were you going to say about Secret Window, Jason?
Oh, it's just funny because I was at one point we were talking. I was actually gonna bring up Secret Window because I actually thought that was it has its flaws, but I do think that's also a really good let's say cousin to this one. It has a lot of the same feel to it. It has a lot of the same energy as this one, and it explores mental illness mostly in a pretty real way, in a way that's now it jumps the shark at the end a little bit, but it I don't know, it has a lot of the same bones. I actually think that one is not given a fair shake either. I think that's another good one for again, the thematic similarities.
Cool.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite short stories. So I have a lot of issues with the movie, but
yeah.
But overall, I definitely think that it has a lot in common and could definitely almost work like a double feature. Like you get such a different vibe going on that it could be really cool together.
Yeah, I agree. Almost definitely.
All right, cool. So I suppose that brings us to the part where we say, do you want people to follow you online, Jason?
Well, not unless everyone gets really cool with a lot of stuff,
Real fast.
I don't have a strong social media presence. I mostly share memes. But that being said, I am hoping to have some related elements of yours, James, out within the next year, as you mentioned. So do be looking out for that, because we will be pushing that really hard.
Oh, yeah.
Super hard, because I put a lot of work into it, and someone's going to read the damn thing. So
you like there's no way to even comment on that, but the amount of work that you've put into this project is phenomenal. Like just crazy amounts. We're going to lock you up with Halle Berry because it's like a reward.
Oh, that's nice. I'm going to submit it and see if they'll give me a master's degree. Just like, here's my thesis. I did it. Give me it.
It's so incredibly historically accurate that it's very impressive. Yes, I can't wait.
So do be looking for that. That will be coming out, and hopefully more projects to follow after that.
Very cool. All right. Well, I suppose that wraps it up then. So, Jason, thank you for being here. I know we've talked about this for quite a while, and I'm glad we made it happen. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
We'll have to come up with a bit more of a fan favorite one for the next one. Something people have all seen.
So
and then I'll be like, yeah, I've never seen that, but okay, cool, because that's what always happens.
It's amazing to me how many.
It's not Jaws.
Yeah, it's amazing to me the number of movies you haven't seen, despite what you do.
I'm very, I don't know. I'm stuck in my world.
Well, expand your horizons. So, to the audience, my last parting thing, again, if you haven't seen Gothica, it is on Netflix at the time of this recording, at least. It is definitely worth watching. Please give it a shot. Don't listen to anybody who told you something 20 years ago about it. Go see it. It's great.
Absolutely. All right. So, until next week, as always, I'm James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you back here at thenecronama.com.